They've consolidated all of this power. They do have anti-competitive practices. You have to clearly define them and have very strict limiting principles on that. But at the same time, laws exist to be enforced. So let relevant federal agencies, after congressional oversight, actually enforce those laws. And if tweaks need to be made to sort of cut into these abuses, then I think that should be on the table.
I'm just going to cut in here, but agencies at the moment seem to be going in the other direction, right? That's what we've been talking about today.
Yep, that's problematic. But I still believe in America, this republic, right? And it's messy, but I do believe that conservatives at some point, or people who actually believe in freedom of expression, will eventually be able to exercise that power at some point. I still think there are good people within these agencies who do want to do the right thing. And this is also the reason why we're not saying that the solution is government. We're not saying that the solution exists in these federal agencies whatsoever. Hence the spreading of all of our manner of solutions, and the ability to get after that has to be distributed among all sorts of options. So that's just one tiny little option. Another option, I think, is cutting into that ad tech model, scrutinizing that ad tech model. That is the beating heart of these tech companies. That is what Zuckerberg is going to pay attention to if somebody starts talking about, the way that they make their money. So scrutinizing that, making it much more difficult for these companies to gather, to micro-target, to exploit the data of users. And on that note, there has to be some sort of data privacy framework. I think data privacy legislation should absolutely be next on the agenda for Congress. The American user should know how their data is stored, collected, whom it's shared with, how it's used. There should be time limits, limits on indefinite storage. There should be privacy protections imbued in the data and the design of these products themselves. That's critical. And then transparency. That is one thing. Let tech companies tell us, the American people, how they got to where they got. And that is in terms of content moderation, behaviors, and practices. Give us impact assessments. When were you wrong? How many times were you wrong? When were these accounts restored? Why were they taken down? Were they just suspended? What's the granularity here? Let the American people know. In addition to algorithmic transparency, we shouldn't have to wait until Frances Haugen leaks a trove of documents to know that in 2018, Facebook tweaked its algorithm to maximize user engagement and make content more incendiary surface easily on your news feed. And then lastly, that data transparency element as well. Again, users in plain, clear English terms should be aware of how their data is used, stored, collected, and shared. Absolutely critical. And then that's sort of how the government can play a role in giving some teeth to this legislation, so that tech companies actually decide that, hey, we don't think our self-policing is working anymore, because they are absolutely breathing down our necks. So give some teeth, have that public availability component. That's absolutely critical. And then state legislators, again, are labs of democracy, right? They can figure out what works. The attorney generals have, they have a higher degree, I believe, of efficacy than the federal government, because it's sclerotic, it's lumbering, it's much slower, and states can move a lot faster. So let 1,000 ideas among the states bloom. I think we need to be able to allow them to have imagination to attack this problem, and that's state legislatures and attorney generals as well. And then tech founders have a huge duty here, a huge responsibility to build in a way that they're very cognizant of what big tech can do to new entrants and new platforms, like Twitter competitor Parler, right? It was kicked off of Google Play. It was kicked off the Apple's App Store when it was sitting at the very top of the store at #1. And then when Amazon Web Services pulled the plug from them and refused to offer them cloud hosting services, they went lights out. And they're back now, but not as originally conceived. So tech founders have a duty to remember that and build with business models that are encompass the full technology stack, that maybe offer cloud hosting services too, so that they are insulated from being completely shut down by bigger tech companies that they're beholden to. So huge distribution of responsibility. I think civil society has a role too when it comes to these platforms' effects on teen girls that they know that they're propagating, and they want to keep going and even supercharge it. Parents should be up in arms about this. Parents should be phone foaming at the mouth to stop all of this. So there's a civil society and grassroots outcry that I think needs to occur as well. So those are just some examples. There's many more in the paper, but I think there needs to be a full-throated, fulsome response to some of these abuses, and especially in the way that they're working with the government. That should be prohibited. Using tech companies as agents of the government to chill speech, absolutely prohibited. Also, the joint ventures with Chinese companies, such as Tim Cook's deal to the tune of $275 billion with China, should also be prohibited as well. There's no reciprocity there. They take and they take and they take from us. They put their spokespeople on our platforms to spew propaganda. We have no visibility really or purchase on their digital platforms at all. So why are they allowed on our digital platforms too? So just a couple ideas for you, and I think pursuing all of them at once, an array of option, is really going to get us to the final solutions that we're looking for and the shaping of behavior by these companies working with the government.
So it strikes me that if any country, if any system has the tools, perhaps initiated by the founding fathers way back when, to counter some sort of government giant industry fusion or collaboration, it strikes me it should be the US. Right, and so what are those tools that should be deployed now, right? By that, perhaps in the Constitution, perhaps in other places in the legal system. You're describing, as I said earlier, a very difficult and immediately serious problem, and at least there doesn't appear to be, aside from a really well done report, a ton of response. And actually, to be fair, a lot of building of these independent ecosystems and tech stacks and so forth. That is definitely happening.
I think it starts with diagnosing the problem accurately. Right, so we have to understand and impress upon people that we have specific rights that are given to us by God, enshrined in the Declaration of Independence and then the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, like the freedom of speech, that can be infringed upon by these massive private companies, especially when they're working with the government. So I think people need to recognize how that really cuts into human flourishing first and foremost, and that, instead of saying they're private companies, they can do whatever they want, recognize that that's a problem.
So basically here you're saying this is the thing that's stifling the conservative response. That's what I'm hearing from you, right?
I would say the laggards in the conservative response, because people get it now. Most of conservatives, get it now. And then you understand that, you diagnose the problem accurately, and not just its economic components, but its cultural and its political components as well. Those should be embedded, and those imperatives should be understood when you're formulating any solutions whatsoever. So it starts with that. It starts with properly diagnosing the problem, which I think a lot of people, not just on the right, on the left too, they've absolutely failed to do that.